Well, I've got some great news for you. On the outside of the hotel, we've now earned the privilege of being demonstrated against. I was starting to worry our enemies didn't even care about us anymore. To caution you, and it's a very important issue. The best way you can treat the demonstrators is to completely ignore them. Don't go outside the hotel to gander at them. Don't try to take pictures of them. Don't try to video them. Don't try to convert them. Just completely ignore them. And that's the best thing that we can do. So this event might earn some publicity this evening, and who knows. But the main thing is just be cool. Everything's cool. It's just a few radical communists. You know how it goes. Which reminds me of an issue. It's so funny. The other day, the Times-Picayune, which is our New York Jewish newspaper in New Orleans, owned by the Newhouse family. Locally, we call them the Jewhouse family. They had an article on April 1st, which is always an appropriate day, for a newspaper article of the Zionist press. And it was about a Russian Negro Jewish scholar. It was about a lady by the name of, maybe lady is too loose a term I'm using here, but it's about a woman named Liv Golden, who was the granddaughter of an American sharecropper, Negro from Mississippi, who apparently went to the Soviet Union in its early days. He became an activist, an open communist. And he married, a Russian Jewish lady. Thank God it wasn't a Russian lady. And their descendant, in fact, married some sort of African communist leader. And so she's of that prodigy. She was a friend of Svetlana Stalin. Anyway, she was here in New Orleans to lecture at the Black University, Dillard University, about the greatness of leaders such as Paul Robeson and W.E. Du Bois, which is, those of you who know, should know, they were open communist revolutionaries in this country who called for communist revolution here, who supported the Bolshevik Revolution. And W.E. Du Bois, in fact, died in Ghana. So the Times-Picayune wrote an article about their coming to speak to the Black University. The article never made it really clear that these people were communist revolutionaries, Robeson and Du Bois. But the article went out of its way to attack your host here at this conference, David Duke. And I can quote. I don't have the article in front of me, but the quotation. It's an amazing quote. They quote Miss Golden. It's quite elderly now. They quote her as saying, "David Duke's books are sold in the halls of the Duma, the parliament. That they're sold." She said they're sold in the halls of the Moscow City Hall, a city of 13 million. She said they're sold on almost every street corner, and she said the Russian people are prone to buy it and read it. And then she proceeds to blame me for all the racial problems in Russia. And the Times-Picayune is so anxious to attack me for my former Klan background, they don't even mention the fact that she's at a major university here in New Orleans, singing the praises of two Bolshevik revolutionaries. And that just shows you how things have turned around in this country, and how, as Sam Dixon said so eloquently, that there's nothing anymore left to conserve. We have already been taken over. We are already an occupied nation. They control our media. They dominate our government. They dominate our educational system. They dominate our legal system. We are revolutionaries. We want a new way of looking at things. We're not against the Constitution, but we understand that the core issue of any country is not it's not its founding document. It's not a particular even attitude toward life. The core of any nation, the most important and vital core of a nation, is its people. And this nation, as we know America and as we love America, or the image of America that we love, was a product of the European American people. And the only way that America will survive, the America that we love in our hearts and minds, and maybe even our memories today, is if we make sure that the people who founded this nation, the European Americans, survive. And that's what we're about here today. It is now my distinct privilege to introduce a man who's been waging this fight in Britain for many years. And in Britain or anywhere else in the world, there is no one who would disagree with the statement that this individual has been the leading light of our cause in Britain over the last 3 decades, maybe even 4 decades, I should say, maybe 5. I'm not quite sure. He looks a lot younger than I think that he really is. There's just no way I can adequately introduce this man as far as his qualifications, his abilities, his courage, his honor, his intellect. He's the co-founder of the British National Party, which where there's very good prospects they'll do well in some serious elections in Britain very soon. He's the editor of Spearhead magazine, which is one of the premier publications for our cause in Britain. He's the author of a very stirring book, The 11th Hour. In fact, we used that term earlier today. He's a descendant of William Tyndall, who was a very, very famous translator of the Bible, if you might remember, in Britain. And also Professor John Tyndall, who was one of the leading physicists of the 19th century. He has a pedigree that reaches far back into our British American past. And he has endured physical attacks in Britain. He has endured even what's more hurtful, the smears and the attacks of character that our enemies are so famous at waging. And he has earned our tremendous respect. And when we welcome him to this podium, what we really must do, all of us, is honor him. John Tyndall.
Mr. Duke, ladies and gentlemen, fellow whites, I'd like to thank Mr. Duke and all those others concerned for this invitation to come and speak to you here this weekend. I've enormously enjoyed the visit. I've enormously enjoyed meeting such wonderful people and hope to enjoy meeting more this evening and tomorrow. Nothing but gratitude. Perhaps I may be permitted a few words of introduction of myself in the context of this occasion. I'm one of those well able to understand how David Duke is feeling right now in his first month of freedom. I've been where he's just been. In 1986, I was sent to jail for 4 months, 6 months sentence, I did for writing and publishing words liable to stir up racial hatred. Not an offense here in America, yet. Though I'm well aware that certain people are working on this right now. So, as one heretic to another, perhaps I ought to suggest to Mr. Duke that we get together, with 1 or 2 others are here as well, to form a patriotic ex-jailbirds association. How about that? Now, when I was given my freedom, after sentence in 1986, I too had a welcome back meeting and said something which could do with repeating now. I said that history provides a number of examples of the truth that those who are in jail today may well be in power tomorrow. I also said, pointing out to history once again, that those who are in power today might well be in jail tomorrow. This is a particularly appropriate time to dwell on that theme, because we have many politicians in your country and mine, perhaps thousands or even tens of thousands, who should rightly be in jail for the crimes they've committed against our people. I've always enjoyed coming to America. I've always been greatly interested in America, and I've always thought that no one with the least knowledge of history, the history and development of your country, could possibly believe in the current madness of racial equality. Here is a great continent of boundless wealth, but which was just a wilderness before the coming of the white man. It was the white man and white women who tamed it, developed it, ran it, built it, and created a civilization here. And yet now the white people are being asked to surrender that civilization in the name of race equality. I say again, who can possibly know the history of America and still believe in race equality? I ask a similar question about the leaders of the church, the clergy, the priesthood. These people spend their working lives surrounded by the artifacts of the genius of the white man. They gaze up to the towering heights of the great cathedrals, St. Peter's, Rome, Chartres, Burgos, Cologne, Lincoln, Durham, and see the intricate carvings, the work of ordinary artisans of our race, working centuries ago, before all the modern implements of building were introduced, cranes and so on, using primitive wooden scaffolding, which could well collapse under them, and sometimes did, when there were many, many hundreds of feet up, creating these wonderful works in our cathedrals. Even those who minister in the smaller churches, in their many, many thousands around the white world, must get a feel every day of their working lives, of the white man's heritage of skill and creativity, if only by beholding the beautiful stained-glassed windows, or hearing the glorious religious music, the St. Matthew Passion, the Missa Solemnis, in the whole vast length and breadth of Africa. Nothing has been produced over thousands of years to equal one small movement of a string quintet by Schubert. Or one small cornice in the corner of the Sistine Chapel created by Michelangelo. The noise has emanated from Africa across the centuries, together with that we hear coming from that African outpost, Detroit, or Liverpool, or Birmingham. Nothing of this, all that noise, is not worth those few bars of a Schubert quintet or any of the great religious music of the great masters of European music. The clergy and the priesthood, they live more closely to this heritage than any of us. Yet we find them everywhere in the vanguard of the movement to pull down white civilization and promote multiracialism, which means, of course, as Sam Dixon has pointed out brilliantly earlier on today, the death of our people. Every day of our working lives, we're surrounded by the marvels of modern technology. We work with the brilliant inventions of our ancestors and our contemporaries. But do we pause to think that about 90% of these great inventions can be traced to just 3 countries: the United States, Britain, and Germany? I'm sure almost everybody does think about these things, but it's not the done thing to talk about it in polite company. It leads us along the murky paths of political incorrectness, which end with the universally feared bogey of racism. Your compatriot Neil Armstrong, when he set foot on the moon back in 1969, said, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Well, Mr. Armstrong, who very rightly is a national hero in this country, was being diplomatic. It wasn't a giant leap for mankind. It was a giant leap specifically for white mankind. In particular, white America, with a bit of help from other whites, especially Germans. Mankind as a whole had nothing whatever to do with it. The technology leading to the conquest of space, like virtually all other technology that surrounds us, is the white man's creation, even if a few other races here and there have been able to imitate it. So again, how can it be? How can it be that intelligent people, working every day with the marvels of modern technology, to which Africans have contributed nothing, can seriously believe in race equality? How can Americans, who inhabit a continent built by whites out of nothing, believe in race equality? Well, the answer to these questions is a simple one. They don't believe in it. They don't believe in it. Americans don't believe in race equality. British people don't believe in race equality. The clergy doesn't believe in race equality. Whites everywhere know race equality is nonsense, at least most of them. But so many are scared to admit it. Sam Dixon dwelt on this in his speech earlier as well. I found Sam anticipating some of my own words, which I'm only too pleased to know that somebody sees things, particularly a person like Sam, sees things in such a similar way. They're scared to admit it. This, my fellow white folk, is our big problem. It's the nature of what we're struggling with. White people across the Western world today remind me of the people of Russia in the twilight years of communism. They're all serving a huge lie. Most of them know it's a lie, because their own experience tells them it's a lie. But they go on serving that lie because they have jobs that depend on the lie. They are part of a system which holds together around the lie. They have salaries they could lose if they challenge the lie. They have positions in society that are tied in with those jobs. The more ambitious of them, that is the so-called elite, have their eyes on career promotion. If they buck the lie, the big lie, they can forget about that promotion, if indeed they keep their jobs at all. This is particularly so with people in the key sectors of society, journalists and broadcasters, academics, and above all, politicians. Sectors of society who have the influence to decide what kind of a society it will be. The people who direct national affairs. In communist Russia, there was more at stake even than that. In addition to all these things, there was state terror. If you refused to serve the lie, there was the early morning knock on the door. There was the gulag. David Duke and I and a few others have tasted a bit of this, but nothing like with the severity as tasted by men like Solzhenitsyn, heroes of the white race in Russia who really suffered. When we think life is getting a bit trying for us, we have to think of the example of people like that, who some of them, they were sent to the frozen wastes of Siberia because they wouldn't kowtow to the liars. They were too proud, they had too much self-respect to serve a system of lies and corruption. And they endured that, and they came through, and they were vindicated, as we will be vindicated by future history. People spend their lives serving a huge lie, or if not serving it actively, serving it passively, looking the other way when confronted with a great injustice tied in with the maintenance of the lie, as in the case of Ernst Zundel. Writing and speaking what they know to be nonsense, because that's what their jobs, their positions in society, their pensions, their ambitions, in the case of Soviet Russia, often their freedom, even their lives, dictate that that's what they have to do. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, the lie prevails. The lie rules because it has power on its side. And this is a key fact which we all have to grasp. It's not enough to have the weapon of truth. We have to have the weapon of power if the truth is to prevail. Now all this is pretty obvious. It doesn't take a genius to work it out. Our activity must be geared to the winning of power. That still has to be said to some people in our movement, here in America, back in Britain and everywhere else. They are crusaders for the truth, but they don't relate it to the necessities of winning power. It cannot be said enough. Power is what must be won. First, just a little bit of power. Then more power, and finally complete power. Activity geared to anything else is a waste of time. Now here in America, David Duke serves as an admirable example of this. He geared his activities to the winning of power. He said and did what was necessary to win power. And he did win a little bit of power for a while here in Louisiana as a state legislator. Now this was an enormous inspiration to us in Britain and all over the world. My party back at home, the British National Party, has focused its entire strategy on winning power. And we have won a little bit of power. Right now, we have 17 town councillors. It's tiny, but it's a beginning. And it's amazing how differently you're perceived if you have even a little bit of power. Let me give you an example. Burnley is a smallish to medium-sized town in Lancashire in the northwest of England, which suffers from the same ills as many towns and cities here in America. It's been invaded by the ethnic minorities. In the case of Burnley, mainly Asians from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. The whites have been dispossessed, and they're very unhappy about it. In the local government elections in 2002, our party, the BNP, got 3 councillors elected. Now we have 7, but then we just had 3. I was scheduled to speak at a meeting of the Burnley BNP in August 2002. When I arrived, there was a howling, smelling, filthy, demented, left-wing mob had assembled outside. I'm sure you're familiar with them. Got some of them outside today, so David Duke tells us. The big travelling freak show. The best freak show in town. They were there to cause trouble, if possible, to stop the meeting. To keep order were plenty of police. Now, in the past, we've often felt we had a raw deal from the police. We were the people keeping within the law, and our opponents were the ones intent on breaking the law. Yet very often, the police were as heavy on us as they were on our opponents. But on this particular night, the police treated us with respect and courtesy and friendliness. And they dealt with the red rabble thoroughly and efficiently. What had made the difference? We had 3 local councillors. That's what made the difference. We had a little bit of power. And the police knew that we only had that power because a lot of local people supported us. David Duke reminded me of this in the last couple of evenings when he and I and some others went for a meal in the town, and the 2 places that David Duke came, once they saw him coming through the door, that was it. We got the red carpet treatment because he has masses of supporters here in New Orleans, masses of them. Now, that's not just because David Duke is a very nice fellow, which he is, of course, but it's also because he's shown power. He doesn't have it right at the moment, but he still has this big following in the background, and he could get it again, power. My point, which I can't hammer home often enough, is that the appeal of an idea, whatever its merits in terms of common sense, is multiplied 10 times over if behind it there's power, even just a little bit of power. Now let's turn from the obvious to the not so obvious. I'm going to talk about the question that occupies us all. We know that we're right, and that the idea of race equality is wrong. Indeed, not only the idea of race equality, but the whole of the liberal consensus which goes with it is wrong. But still, millions of our fellow countrymen and women go on passively, if not actively, supporting race equality and the liberal consensus. They vote for the politicians representing that consensus. And we rack our brains trying to think of new ideas, new techniques of public relations, new ways of appealing to people to break this consensus. And here is where some of us commit a cardinal error. Some of us latch on to the seductive theory that if the masses are not yet voting for us, it's because we don't present our ideas softly enough, gently enough, because we're a bit too uncompromising, because perhaps we're even a little bit too honest. Wrap our ideas up in a gentler packaging, modify them a little, tell a little less than the truth, introduce a little compromise, don't put it over all too harshly. And hey presto, those millions who were frightened to support us in the past will now support us. We'll appear sweet and reasonable. and they won't be able to resist our appeal. Ladies and gentlemen, all this is an illusion. And it's a tragic illusion. It doesn't work. And as someone who's been in this struggle about 47 years, I know what I'm talking about. It won't work. Now, this is not to say that packaging is not important. It's not to say that presenting our ideas in the most attractive way should not be aimed at. David Duke has proved a master at this here in America. I've seen videos of some of his interviews. He's the best interviewee on our side that I've seen. He has that priceless ability to keep his cool when confronted by the most hostile and obnoxious interviewer. He does it far better than I do. If I dislike a TV interviewer, and indeed I dislike most of them intensely, I find it very hard to conceal it. Perhaps it's the Irish in my makeup. I am half Irish. Before you clap too much, I should say orange Irish rather than green Irish. I still think the conflict between the orange and the greens is a tragic thing and should be ended. Anyway, when put on the spot by these creeps, I find my hackles rising. I dare say Mr. Duke does too, but he controls it all so much better than I do. And that's a big asset, a big advantage. But to return to the point, a polite, dignified, friendly presentation of our ideas, our cause, is desirable. No question about that. But this is a world away from softening up and compromising or trying to appease our enemies. Because, believe you me, my friends, our enemies never, never, never will be appeased. And more to the point, Mr. and Mrs. General Public won't be won over. You can try to win them by toning down the strength of our message, wrapping it up in cotton wool, and you'll find yourself against exactly the same barriers as before. Jobs, careers, salaries, mortgages on the house, new car in the driveway, the school fees for the kids, the ion promotion in the company, the concern about one's social position. Your prospect, your would-be recruit, is being asked to take a very big step. A step across the Rubicon, if you like. He is being asked to get involved with an unconventional political movement, a political cause. A political cause that's represented as extreme, as evil, as beyond the pale by the Jewish media. And he considers that prospect, as he considers it, all these things, career promotion, the house, the wife, the family, security, social position, they all flash across his mind. To him, it's a frightening jump. Now, it isn't the fact that he believes all this nonsense. He doesn't believe we're evil. But as long as his peers at work and in local society, they are thought to have that vision of us, he will be deterred from taking part, and it will need courage to get him to take part. It is his perception of peer pressure, of the need to conform, and that is what we're up against. It's a frightening jump. Now, my point is this. If this person is not yet ready to take that jump, not all the softening up, not all the compromising, not all the trimming in the world is going to persuade him. He may trot out for your benefit the excuse that your ideas are too extreme. If you come back a year later and present those ideas in a much milder form, he'll still find them too extreme. He'll still find an excuse not to get involved. What you're up against here is a person whose perception is that we're dangerous people to get involved with because at the moment we are not powerful. So the first lesson is to realize that it's our lack of power, not our so-called extremism. That's the big deterrent. And anyway, what is extremism? At different times across history, extremism has meant different things. Not long ago, here in America, our ideas were perfectly mainstream. Only odd people, marginalized people, extremists, believed in race equality. The older ones among you here will understand this and know and have experienced what I mean. So what has changed since then? Has the truth changed? Is what was true then no longer true now? No. What has changed is power. Power then was in different hands, and that's what we're up against. Those who have the power today, and we know who they are able to determine what is mainstream and respectable and what is extreme. So we have to understand that extremism is a meaningless term. It's entirely what the current makers of public opinion decide it'll be. No more, no less. But, as previous speakers have said, this is changing. It's changing, and more people in your country and ours do not take their orders from the media, the Jewish media, as to what they will think is extreme and what they think is acceptable politics. And here's where we must recognize something very important. We white patriots must never fall into the trap of accepting or using our enemy's definition of the word extremist, any more than we should accept our enemy's definition of the word racist. These words are enemy inventions, designed to put an end to all discussion, designed to intimidate people. And the moment we start to use them, and especially if we start to view their meanings as the enemy would have us view them, we're fighting the battle on the enemy's ground. We're fighting according to his rules. And we'll be fighting the battle on the enemy's ground and according to the enemy's rules once we start to imagine that we're going to win people over by softening our principles. People simply are not impressed by this. They detect phoniness. And I'm quite sure that the American people, like the British people, have had quite enough of phonies as political leaders. And if you want to operate as a phony, if you want to be a phony, I have news for you. George W. Bush and Tony Blair, they can do it far better than you can, far better than we can. If we try to play the game of being political phonies, they will beat us every time. But my experience back in Britain is that the phonies are on the way out. The phonies are more than ever discredited. What seriously worries mainstream journalists now in Britain, and it may be the case here too, what is sending them frantic is the fact that more and more people are staying away from the polling booths because they have complete contempt for all politicians. Tony Blair, the Conservatives, Bush, Kerry, complete contempt for politicians. So we're not going to score any points by playing at being phonies. People are looking for honest men and women at the head of national affairs. And we must give them those honest leaders, and that is what will make them come with us in the fullness of time. And we must always remember another thing. the people that we're seeking to win over, the mass of the public, are a bit weaker than we are. Not weaker in every way. They include men with great war records, great service records. They include people of courage. But weaker in their political attitudes. This means that it's up to us to infuse them with our strength, something of our strength. Our strength has to rub off on them as we speak to them, for that's the only way we're going to get them to come with us. If we radiate weakness by being anything less than 100% convinced of the rightness of our cause, totally unapologetic about the rightness of our cause, by presenting our ideas to people, if we present our ideas to people in a half-baked way, as if we're apologizing for them, our own uncertainty, our own weakness will communicate itself to the people we want to convert, and that will justify their weakness to themselves. We have to be, in a way, psychologists. And we have to try to get into the inner recesses of the minds of the people we're trying to win over. And that is, I think, a very important thing to bear in mind in that task. Anything we do that radiates weakness will vindicate them in their own cowardice, and nothing will be done. And that's why I oppose utterly the tactics of going to people and saying, really, we're not racists. That straight away is an admission that we recognize racism as wrong. And if we do that, we may as well run up the white flag. I never, never, never deny the charge of being a racist. I don't go about shouting that I'm a racist, because that's admitting the validity of a piece of the enemy's language. But I never run away from the charge of racism, and I recommend that neither should you. I think sometimes we tend to believe that all those people out there, the masses, they're full of these wimpy liberals that Sam Dixon spoke so brilliantly about earlier today. They're all like that. You know, they're frightened of people like us. Well, I've had one or two experiences which suggest the contrary. One experience, two experiences I'm going to relate to you as quickly as I can. I was parliamentary candidate for the BNP in a by-election in Dagenham in 1994. Dagenham is a sort of suburban town on the eastern fringe of London. And I was a parliamentary candidate there, and I was going around canvassing, just like you have to do, going around speaking to as many of the local voters as I could. And I just left a house where I'd been speaking to the people there. I was crossing the road, and I saw a group of young construction workers doing a sort of road repair job. And I went up to them, and they looked, there were about 4 or 5 of them, they looked tough, good, tough, white, young men. The types you'd like to have with you in a trench in wartime, you know, when the shooting starts. And I said to them, excuse, I'm John Tyndall, the BNP candidate. I hope you'll vote for us, etc., etc. And voice comes from one of the workers, and here I must censor out 1 or 2 words, because this is a very respectable audience with lots of ladies here, and therefore I'll have to just censor out 1 or 2 words. I'm sure those of you who've been in the armed forces, or in prison for that matter, will know exactly what I mean. But this young chap, who seemed to be the leader of the group, the foreman, he said, "What are you going to do about a bleeding foreigners coming here?" So I said, we're going to organize a humane repatriation scheme, all very all very civilized. With expenses paid, we will pay them to go home, and we will pay to set them up in the... Wait a minute, mate. That's much too expletive soft, he says. Much too soft with the expletives. You know what I'd expletive do, mate? I'd get them all in a great big expletive boat. I'd sail the boat out to the middle of the ocean, and I would expletive well sink it. That's what I'd do. Now, of course, I had to assure him, and of course the others roared their approval of this was being said. So I had to assure him, no, we don't do things like that, you know, we're civilized people, and we would not do anything like that. You know, that I believe that my scheme that I've been presenting you is the right way to do it. I still hope you'll vote for me, because after all, I'm nearer to your way of thinking than any of the others are. Okay, mate, we'll think about it. Now, anyway, there's an example of the fact, you know, a lot of the general public are a lot further along the way to extremism than we are. Now, another experience, I was fighting an election in the general election in Britain in 1992, and I was contesting a seat in East London, and the campaign was being organized by my campaign manager, agent as we call them there, and he said, there's one local lady you must meet. She's a kind of matriarch in this street. If you get her on your side, you'll win the whole street. It could be, get her vote, it could be worth 200 more votes. So she's a very important lady. She has a lot of influence on the local community. So we went along to this lady's house. I was half expecting to see some sort of a big domineering butch type, you know. But no, there's a very gentle, sweet old lady. She just looked as if she wouldn't harm a fly. And so I explained our policy to her on immigration and repatriation. And she said, in the way that London East Enders say, well, love, she said, yeah, that's all very well, but you know what I think? I think we need someone like Hitler. That's what I think. This is an example. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there in middle America who you think they're wimpy liberals and wishy-washy politically correct types of people, but they are not. Now, I'm never suggesting that we say anything like this lady said to me, or that we say what the building worker said to me, but we should never underestimate the public. They are not as soft as many think, but they are influenced by the fact that we do not have power. And showing a little bit of power is what is going to win them over in their millions. And we made a start in Britain. We've got 17 council seats. David Duke has made a start here in the United States by his brilliant performance in the Louisiana elections a little while ago. Now, to wind up, I might quote the words of a Chinese sage who used to say to people, "May you live in interesting times." And we most certainly do live in very interesting times. We live in a time when history can be made. In fact, history screams out to be made by the action of people like us. We look out there among the general public, the brainwashed boobies and their millions. Sam so perfectly described. Sam, I'll expect 2 or 3 drinks this evening after all this. But, very interesting times. All these people who've been ruled by the liberal consensus, the consensus of produce and consume. People that are going nowhere. In healthy times, great nations are conscious of their past, and they're conscious of their duty to pass on what has been won by those in the past to those in the future. The broad mass of public in Britain, and I suspect in America today, are enslaved by this live for the moment, produce and consume society. A people that is going nowhere. A great many of them think that way. An awful lot of unhappy people. Again, another drink here, Sam. Again, he put it so well. He talked about the joy of participation in our struggle. And I can underline that 100 times over. We are the happy people. We're not as wealthy as them, many of them. We're perhaps not as secure. We may not have the two cars in the driveway. We may not have all the luxuries that they have. But we have a deep exhilaration and having a meaning to our lives. Each and every one of us, even if our contribution, whether it is large or small, we are living. They are suffering a living death. Those masses out there. But they're not irretrievable. Because we can bring them, by our example, into the ranks of the living with us. And we can give them a purpose to their lives which they have lost due to the utter lack of leadership they've had from their politicians for so long. These people, these neurotic, unhappy people who are constantly seeing shrinks every week, what kind of lives do they lead? The people who are hooked on drugs, the people who, you could go on and on and on. They're unhappy people out there, and they want a rescue. They want a hand that will stretch out to them to rescue them from their meaningless lives and join something that means something, that is going somewhere, and provides them something that they have lacked for so long, a sense of pride and identity as white Americans, as white Britons, white Germans, French, and so on. I'm one of the older ones here today, but I can say to the younger ones present, if you want a life of meaning and of joy, there is nothing better than becoming an activist in the struggle for your race. We can't all be full-time activists like I am, but being an activist in your spare time can give you that meaning to your life, and you will never regret it. And I have never regretted 1 second of the time I've spent in this struggle. Though I've been beaten up, as David Dew said, I've been to jail 3 times. I'm conscious of time, so I won't describe the other 2 occasions because there are other people waiting to speak. But I've been to jail 3 times. I have been beaten up, and the worst thing of all, was with my wife when I was attacked, and she was beaten up too. So we've been through these things, but it is all worthwhile. It is 1,000 times worthwhile. I would never have changed any of it. And it is the life that I recommend to you. So, I'm going to cut things short now. I'll just end up with a couple more sentences. Our people have a choice. We have taken that choice, but our nations have a choice. We're lucky to live at a time of great decision, of great destiny, such as befall all great nations at certain key points in their history. And we have, at that time of destiny, the choice of lying down and surrendering, of giving in, or we have the choice of staying and fighting. But we, one day, will be answerable to our grandchildren. And our grandchildren are going to say to us, when that great time of decision came, what did you do? Did you give in? Or did you fight? Are we going to say to them, well, the struggle was too severe. The odds were too strong. Perhaps we left it a bit too late. We hadn't a chance, and therefore we lost our country. We lost our nationhood. Or will we be able to say to them with pride and honor, I was one of those who fought, and there were more and more who came and fought with me. I went out into the streets and worked and struggled for our cause. We stood firm like the men at the Alamo, like the men at Rorke's Drift, like the men at Blood River. We fought to the bitter end, and we won!